Since the very dawn of time, mankind has pondered upon two fundamental questions. First, why are we here? And second, should I get the OP-1 or the Deluge? Today, I hope to answer at least one of those questions. Hi, welcome to the Midlife Synthesist. Let's get started. In this video comparison, we're going to be looking at the Teenage Engineering OP-1 and the Synthstrom Deluge. Now, if you know me by now, you know that I'm not a big fan of doing side-by-side spec sheet comparisons, as both of these machines are far much more than just the sum of their parts. But we are going to be looking at them from an everyday user's perspective, and we're going to focus on what makes each of these devices special in its own right. So let me just start out by saying that I absolutely adore both of these devices, and that's what makes comparing them even more difficult. You see, these are some of the most special and unique groove boxes out there. Both of them are first-class, portable, standalone, battery-powered, all-in-one music workstations. You can do anything from synthesizing a new sound to making a whole music album on either one. They both offer particular workflows that spark creativity and are geared towards getting you to make more music anywhere, anytime. They both have a decidedly boutique and premium feel to them, but you have to remember they're made by pretty small companies, so they tend to be in short supply. That also means that getting one is all the more difficult, and, of course, all the more satisfying. They both sport proper synth engines, which offer some interesting sound designing capabilities, and can also act as samplers and audio manglers, so your sound generating possibilities are quite extensive. They are also great drum machines, and have some seriously awesome sequencing capabilities, and the ability to multi-track the onboard sounds and export them to audio. Both of them can be hooked up to a computer via USB, either for file management or for MIDI capabilities, but that's where the similarities pretty much end. So let's take a look at what sets these two apart. The OP-1 is a machine that was designed with the intention of breaking you out of traditional synthesis and sound design methods. By ditching those traditional means, you achieve two things. First, you have to rely heavily on what you're hearing, trading traditional synth parameters for beautiful graphics that appear as strange shapes on your screen to give you a more organic experience, free of numbers or technical mumbo-jumbo. This in turn makes sound design much more accessible and less intimidating than other machines. You can just let go and see where the process takes you, which is in itself a wonderful experience. More seasoned synthesists might miss having those more measurable parameters though. The Deluge, on the other hand, is much more traditional for sound design and a bit more complex in its sound shaping capabilities. You have multiple modulators as well as a very interesting patching system, which can be very captivating. This does mean that you should study the manual if you intend to use it as anything else other than a sequencer, especially regarding the audio mangling and editing functions. The huge grid with teeny tiny letters might get a bit confusing at first, especially if you're blind like me, but I'm happy to report that it does get easier with time. As audio manglers, both have pretty cool tricks up their sleeves, with the Deluge having a slight edge. As far as slicing and editing those start and end points on the audio sample, I have to say I much prefer the high resolution screen on the OP-1. Now don't get me wrong, the Deluge is absolutely usable, it's just that I'm kind of spoiled by now with the screens on the MPC and the Octatrack and such. As far as the sound itself, I think that both of these sound pretty good. However, if you were going to spend $1,000 on either of these looking to have the best sounding synth out there, you're kind of missing the point. Lots of people get hung up on that, but I think that the objective of these machines was never to be the best synths in the market. I think that they're great for giving you a great and wide palette of sounds which you can experiment and tweak with, all with the objective of getting you quickly to the good stuff, which is actually making music and arranging it with multiple layers and different effects. Speaking of effects, I have always said that I find that the weakest link on the OP-1 as a sound making machine are its effects. And when compared to the Deluge, it's not even a very fair fight. Not only do the effects on the Deluge sound great, but you can also automate them on a per-step basis, much like an Elektron-style sequencer, so the things you can get away with are pretty crazy. Probably one of my favorite things on the OP-1 are its many sequencers. They're all very weird and quirky, and they have led me down paths that I would never have dreamed of by myself. It is truly a cure for writer's block, and that to me is priceless, and one of the reasons why I love it so much. The Deluge, on the other hand, is the closest thing I've ever seen to the proverbial DAW in a box. You've probably heard it being compared to Ableton, as the workflow is extremely similar. Coming from the confines of the Push, the Electrons, and the MPC, this grid feels like running in a field after spending all your life on a treadmill. and it only makes me want to try out the Poly tracker even more. Another great thing about the sequencer is the Elektron style conditional trig and parameter locking you can do on the Deluge. It is very well implemented and straightforward, though I must say that it is less of a happy accident machine as Big Daddy Octatrack. Instead, you get a wonderful platform for trial and error, making it really easy to set up complex sequences of notes and chords. Strictly speaking, you can live loop all you want on the OP-1. However, it is a very bare bones experience, as in you only get 4 tracks and you can only control this function via the keyboard. On the Deluge you get the full package, with multiple tracks available to you, the ability to warp and process those tracks in real time without stopping playback, and also the ability to control the looper with an external pedal. This makes the Deluge a much more performance-oriented machine with enormous possibilities for live looping enthusiasts. What I really appreciate about the Deluge over the OP-1 though, is that it can time stretch a sample without affecting the pitch, and can automatically adjust the sample to the tempo of your song when you're live looping. And I have found it to be more comparable to the Octatrack than to the OP-1 in this category, which is very high praise. Okay, so what about storage space and hard drive? In the case of the OP-1, you have a fixed hard drive and a set number of presets and samples that you can have at any given time directly on the synth. The problem is you can't name any new patches that you might make on the fly, so if you want to rename any of these set patches, you're going to have to go into a computer and start organizing your files there. The Deluge, on the other hand, is far more flexible as it uses SD cards for its storage. And since SD cards are pretty cheap nowadays and come in all sizes, it opens up a lot of possibilities. Also, for naming your actual files directly on the Deluge, you can do that with a little keyboard that pops up on the grid, which is actually pretty cool and extremely useful. In terms of actually navigating your folders and finding your files, I have to give it to the OP-1. The screen on the Deluge doesn't make it very fast or very intuitive to be looking around in your folders, since you can only see that many letters on the screen at any given time. I think that if we ever see an upgraded hardware version of the Deluge, like a Deluge 2.0, I think that one of the first things that we're going to see is a much better screen, because that would just make it the perfect machine. Regarding portability and battery life, both of these things take the cake. Now, in the case of the OP-1, it's been my longtime favorite thing to be carrying around with me since I barely notice it in my backpack. And also, the battery seems to be powered by Tony Stark's arc reactor. I mean, this thing lasts forever. And if you're going to have a portable device, that thing is only as useful as its battery life. If you don't believe me, I have a Sega Game Gear that I want to sell you. The Deluge, on the other hand, is a bit bulkier than the OP-1, but it's by no means as huge as the MPC. It's more in the line of a pretty thick 13-inch laptop. Even though the Deluge is a bit larger than the OP-1, it more than makes up for that with its weight. The first time you grab a Deluge, you won't believe how light this thing is. I mean, it's like it's empty inside. And that is extremely good news for people who want to be carrying around all day long. In terms of battery life, though not as impressive as the OP-1, the Deluge is no slouch either, and I've clocked it around 5 to 7 hours with intense use, which is more than enough for my portable music making needs. Finally, one aspect where the Deluge just steamrolls over the OP-1 is in the connectivity. You see, the OP-1 has always been meant to be this self-contained, kind of selfish unit, so you only get an audio in and audio out, and a USB port. The Deluge, on the other hand, really means business. You get full 5-pin MIDI in and out, you get CV ins and outs, you get full 1/4-inch line in and stereo outputs, as well as being able to function as a USB host. So, pretty much the whole package. So up until now, we have that both of these machines are pretty decent synths, are very cool sequencers, are very portable, and have great battery life, so you can make music anywhere. But the thing is, what makes these two machines so amazing and so powerful is not each individual feature by itself, but how they're all intertwined and how they come together to make a beautiful whole. That came out wrong. What I'm trying to get at here is that both of these machines, beyond how good they sound or how much I can, just distort an audio sample, or that I can take it anywhere in my backpack, what I really appreciate about both of them is just how good the workflow is. You see, both of these have led to some of the most creative works that I've ever done, and I attribute all of that to the workflow. Whichever one of these two machines you end up choosing, I can almost guarantee you'll start making music that you would have never made before. And that's where I think that the big difference between the OP-1 and the Deluge lies. And it has nothing to do with how good they sound or how long their battery lasts. but what you want to do with it as a musician in this point in your journey. As I said before, the OP-1 was made to be a self-contained unit. So when you make music on the OP-1, it's not supposed to be anything else than that. It's just the sounds that you have on the OP-1, the samples you have on the OP-1, and whatever you record on that tape will be set in stone. Of course, you can later on rewrite it and replay it on something else, but you have to start from scratch. The Deluge, on the other hand, is a composer's best friend, and it's all thanks to this little magical button right here. This button converts your synth or drum track into a MIDI track and can send that music sequence to your other synths. For me at least, it's been a total game changer, and it's kind of like a cornerstone in my writing process now. The Deluge has become this magical notepad that I carry around with me everywhere I go, and when I start fleshing out ideas and creating synth parts, I'll actually start thinking about which synth I'm going to assign that part to. And the cool thing about that is that it started to make me think of my studio as a whole, kind of like an orchestra that I have in my home. So in closing, who are these two machines for, and which one do I think that you should pick? Well, to answer that question, I think that you have to do a much deeper dive than you usually do when you're picking out synths. And I think it comes down to answering these two questions. First is, in this point in your life, what do you enjoy more? The process of making music or the actual music itself, the end product? If you enjoy the actual process of making music more than the end product in itself, I have to say, the experience of making music on the OP-1 is pretty unparalleled. So if you're someone who's just looking to have fun making music and just having a wild time, by all means, grab an OP-1. However, if what you value right now is the actual song you end up making, and if you want to grab that song and make it into the best version of that song that it can possibly be, man, are you in for a treat with the Deluge. Seriously, I think that every producer nowadays should have at least one, if not two, or three. The Deluge is not only a great centerpiece or the brains of a big multi-synth studio, but I also see it as a very good starting point for someone who's just beginning to make music and wants to start getting into the hardware side of things. It gives you so many options, and it's just a great performance tool and a production tool. On the other hand, I feel that the OP-1 is for someone who maybe already has lots of synths or had them at some point, and already tried DAWs and different workflows and drum machines and whatever, and is trying to reconnect with that bare bones, raw, non-technical experience of actually making music and enjoying every second of it. Just sitting down somewhere, putting on a pair of headphones, and getting lost in the sweet sounds of synths, drums, and samples. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. I really hope to see you next time, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you then.